You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology. And today we've got what I found to be a great conversation that kind of really wound up going off in more directions than I expected with Kara Maksud, who is of a company, the CEO of a company called Money Habitudes. A little bit more on that coming up shortly, but I think you're really going to enjoy that one. It kind of gets into the whole notion of financial wellness, which is obviously a topic that we've all been talking about quite a bit, and I think she's got some great avenues to kind of take that in a new direction. Let me first mention that you can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group by checking out our website, big-fintech.com. Let me point you in particular this week to our AI development services. You can find a little bit more about that by clicking on the Products and Services tab at the website, and there's a whole explanation. Obviously, again, artificial intelligence not going away, and pretty important to stay on top of that, to stay competitive in the new financial services landscape. Best Innovation Group, very well positioned to help you do that. We'll post a link to that in our show notes as well. I want to also cover, before we get to our interview, it was a big week for earnings reports in the fintech space. A couple in particular that caught my eye. The main one that I want to talk about is Block, which, of course, better known as Square. Jack Dorsey's other company. Don't shed too many tears for Jack Dorsey after he had to sell out to Elon Musk on Square, because on Twitter, because Block and Square is a $42 billion market capitalization company. So he's not doing too bad. This most recent earnings release, though, really focused on their Cash App progress. On the Cash App side, if you talk to younger people, Cash App is every bit as prominent as PayPal and Venmo and things like that. And I think it escapes the attention of some people that that's actually one of the reasons the company is now called Block, because it's actually a portfolio of things that include Square as well as Cash App. I actually printed out from our friends at FT Partners, who I did not get a chance to listen in on the earnings call, but they focused on a couple of things that I thought were particularly interesting. I was not aware of this. In the fourth quarter of last year, Cash App actually launched free overdraft coverage. And that was one of the features that they're using as part of their strategy to drive further direct deposit attraction. So here we go, another company, non-bank, that's actually looking to, or non-traditional bank, I should say, that's looking to actually turbocharge their service offerings that basically become the standard kind of payments and transaction account for these players. So I thought that was an interesting twist. They've also started to offer yield on balances to Cash App users. So you're actually earning an interest rate. We've known that other folks like Venmo have gone in that direction. And here comes Cash App. And that seems to be one of their big priorities right now in terms of the way they're looking to grow the business. So again, that was one of the ones that I thought was a real interesting conversation this week. The other one was PayPal. And I'd say that one was more of a wait and see attitude. But again, a piece of information that I was not as familiar with. They spent more of their time really promoting a new service that they're planning to launch in the second half of 2024 called Fastlane. And it's basically a checkout app that would actually be portable across different, I guess you sign up with a code. And basically, I guess for lack of a better way of thinking about it, it's essentially a digital wallet where you can actually have interoperability across different merchants. So that's what they're really pinning a lot of their hopes on in terms of where their growth is going to be coming from in the second half. This was also very interesting to me. They acknowledged that the late fee legislation that the CFPB is working toward will actually hit their bottom line. And they believe that they're not accounting for it right now. I think that's probably wise because the way this stuff works, it might get caught up in the courts. It's probably not going to have a big impact on the calendar year 2024 for them or at the banks. But they did say that it has a potential to cut their EPS guidance by as much as 3 percentage points. So that was, I had not really thought about the fact that for all the talk about late fees, that affects folks beyond just the traditional banks. Interestingly to me, both of these stocks were relatively flat after these announcements. They both bumped up a little bit at first, but they pretty much finished where they started, which I was a little disappointed by, particularly in the case of Block, which I thought was more impressive. Never ask me for investment advice, by the way. I've got a terrible track record. In the long run, I'm a buy and hold guy. I'm very bullish on the market in general, but I don't try to time stocks for reasons. In fact, several times recently, I've looked at the macro news that has come out and said, oh, the market's going to be going this way today, and it winds up doing exactly the opposite. So what do I know? But both of these stocks, both PayPal and Block, have been up from their recent lows. They both took hits over the course of the last year or so. They're both well off of those lows, but lower than their highs, and didn't really get that much of a bump from these things. But something that I was watching fairly closely. Yet another of the conversations that I had when I was at the Nacuso Network Conference in mid-April down in Orlando, Florida, was with a woman by the name of Kara Maksoud. She's the CEO of Money Habitudes. It was a chance meeting. I saw her on a panel and wound up reaching out to her for a conversation that, this conversation, frankly, could have happened anywhere. It's not specific to Nacuso Network, but I thought it deserved a little bit more time and kind of follow-up. So I'm going to make a few more comments at the end of the interview, too. But for now, let's let Kara put things in her own words in terms of what's going on at Money Habitudes. We finally found a quiet corner here at Nacuso. I'm here with Kara Maksoud. She's the CEO of Money Habitudes, and I saw her. I was not even familiar with your company until I saw you on a panel pretty much right at the start of the conference, and immediately tracked you down and said, this is something I want to talk about. So, Kara, thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Can you just a little bit about the origin story? I mean, I wasn't, like I said, I thought maybe you were the founder, but you tell me this company's been around for 20 years.
Yes. So Money Habitudes started back in 2003 as a deck of cards to start conversations around money.
Let me just make sure people are not a debit card, a deck
of cards. Yes. So it's a 54 statement deck of cards that goes through basic statements. And the assessment's really meant to meet you where you are today. What are you doing in your everyday life? And how does that relate to your financial goals and your financial health? And so my origin story was I spent my early career on Wall Street. I moved into nonprofit work, and having gone on the same block in New York City from working with the wealthiest individuals to the lowest income individuals, what I saw was habits and behaviors and motivations around money were exactly the same. Fast forward, I go back to graduate school and I get a degree in...
I was going to say, I've never seen these initials on your card. FBS, which I think of college football.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't avoid making that
No.
But that's what got you, and then you said that's where you actually first heard of this company.
So the FBS is a financial behavior specialist. The degree covers all the financial psychology coursework. So there's financial therapy and financial psychology coursework that's now part of a personal financial planning graduate degree. Anyway, so during my coursework, I bumped into Money Habitudes as one of the tools that financial practitioners use.
And you mentioned it was originally made for the military?
Yeah, well, she worked with military and extension programs.
Okay.
So extension are family consumer sciences, different agriculture groups. And so it was really, again, to have that conversation around money. Soldiers in the military are given a stipend. Oftentimes their basic needs are covered. So their paycheck can be used for other things, disposable income, if you will. And so what do we think about that money? What do we feel about it? How do we set somebody up so when they leave the military, they can do well?
That's really interesting.
Very fascinating. And so my journey was during graduate school when I bumped into the product. I met the founder. She and I, had some conversations, and I went to go intern for her. I really just wanted to learn. She was in her later age. She had the company for 20 years.
Looking for a succession plan.
And really, how did we bring it digital and to the masses?
And that's the key. So it had physical, and it still is a physical card deck, but now it is also a digital version.
And the digital version had started back in 2018, but it needed to be revamped. It needed to reach the masses, be compliant. And that was really how I started picking up the ball to take it to the next level.
And you mentioned compliance. I know you've got a list on your website, the different channels you work through, educators, high schools, things like that, financial planners, financial wealth management advisors, but you are now looking and you're finding resonance in the credit union space.
Credit union space has been a tremendous space. And I will say the credit union space is the only customer we have, or the only client we have, that uses every single one of the products we distribute.
Well, you mentioned that they like the physical card to the lobby.
Right.
And they
right?
like the digital to actually reach out for other types of
Exactly.
management.
And so they run, right? You can get the same assessment whether you use our card deck or our digital version, but you have the data with the digital version. And so if they're doing that one-on-one coaching, there's nothing better than that. But if they just want to have that, workshop in the retail location, the cards are great.
Yeah. And one of the points you made during the panel, I thought we started getting into the conversation, because again, I believe we were talking about financial wellness, obviously,
Yes.
but one of the big themes here has been, really trying to find ways to, resonate with the youth consumer.
Yeah.
So to the extent that you've got younger people, and this isn't necessarily youth, but we talked about the great wealth transfer.
Yep.
So you made a great point, I think, that the biggest kind of risk factor on the great wealth transfer is what you could call the lottery win.
Right.
Suddenly you've got this bunch, and you pointed out that most of the folks inheriting money have probably been living in a negative net wealth situation
Yep.
up until that moment.
Yeah. So we have a lot, right? We have a big part of our majority right now who were told to go to college and, get these degrees. And a lot of them are sitting in debt. And what we call that is a negative net worth mindset. Right? That debt that sits with them, they go to bed with it every night. They know that it exists. They don't see a way out. Inflation keeps moving, right? And so some of it is their own doing. Some of it's just the environment. But if their parent is a boomer or a grandparent is a boomer and they're in the succession plan to inherit this wealth on their physical balance sheet, right, they can have a positive gain. But because they've been living in this negative net worth mindset, they don't really understand what that means. And so what do we know with lottery winners? When you see a number, right,
it's not real.
It's
Yeah.
not real. They don't understand how it works. The protection of capital or the preservation of capital isn't the forefront. It's what can I do right now to feel good with this money?
Oh, it's ironic because, the whole concept you hear about all the time is generational wealth. And here it is, but you're not equipped necessarily to actually pay it forward, whatever you want to call it.
And think about that. Glenn, if you're living in a position where you've been living in a negative net worth mindset, and I say, hey, Glenn, you should get financially educated. You're like, well, why? Now, all of a sudden, I drop off at your doorstep a suitcase of money.
Yeah.
And you have it paralyzes you. And let's be honest, money's a motivator. Yeah. There's people out there, they're going to try to put their hands in your pocket. And so your trusted circle becomes now where you get financial advice from. Just because they're your trusted circle, are they your best financial advice?
Great point, yeah.
And so that's the concern, right? That's the concern of that we have right now with, look, I'm not here to say I want to manage your money and I want to charge you for this asset under management. I want to get people financially comfortable, not just educated. I want to get them capable. So when these transfers happen, what's the Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. Mm-hmm. So they understand what's been given to them so they can do the right thing with it.
Makes a ton of sense. Kind of on a slightly different topic, you made another point I thought was really interesting when we talked just, again, generations going in both directions.
Sure.
You pointed out that we have these mechanisms, top-down accounts, as you call them, 529 plans, 401ks, to plan for the future. We don't really have the bottom up. We also have elder care and things like that. Can you say a bit about it? Is this part of your education process here?
Yeah, so what we really have been looking at is more than just a financial education. We have a family system that we're all living in. Your family, my family, and we have cultures on top of that. Mm-hmm. We know America, has constantly people coming from other places that then live here. And the way our financial system is set up is a top down, right? That 529 account, which is a great example, is a grandparent or a parent saving for their kid to go to school. Well, what if you come from a culture where the narrative is, I'm going to have you, and then you're going to go out in the world, and then you're going to take care of me because I've put everything into you. A lot of that's
the immigrant experience, right?
Exactly.
And you send the money back home.
Exactly. And we can't not deny that that's a great way to build wealth when multiple people are, eating off the same lights or, living under the same roof, right? That's multiple people are using the same resources. But then we don't have account set up that says, okay, I'm going to take mom and dad, I'm going to put them in my home, I'm going to feed them, I'm going to have the electric for them, I'm going to have the water for them. But now my salary, right now I'm supporting more than just me, my husband, and my child. I've got these 2 additional people. So they're not going to have to go out and get food stamps or whatnot, right? and there's no benefit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? So it's just, in my lifetime, will I be able to, get up and lobby and try to put some of these accounts in place? Because the American system is a little detached, right? As people, we don't see generations living in four or five.
We're starting to see it a bit more.
Well,
no, that's
and
not
it might be
typical.
more
Yeah.
because we need it, because it's
pure housing
unaffordable,
costs, exactly.
right?
Care
But the
costs.
way my dad grew up, there were 11 families that lived in one home. So when we went to go visit my grandmother as a kid, all of her brothers and sisters with all of their grandchildren were in this one house, right? But nobody had big jobs. Nobody was wealthy, but they were
You
wealthy.
put it all together, yeah.
It was all together.
But there's so much more we got to cover on this.
Yeah.
I'd love to have another conversation. But for now, so you actually are working with credit unions
Yes.
as one of your channels, and this is a message that you want to get out there.
Yes, and the credit unions, as I mentioned, they're one of our best, not just clients, but they get it. They want to see their members do better. Our tool allows for that self-awareness. It allows people to stop in a moment and say, okay, what am I doing in my everyday life? And what does that mean for my future financial health and goals? And so working with credit unions has been just amazing.
It's a natural.
The credit union employees, I get message after message from credit union employees that say this tool has changed my perspective and allowed me to work with our members so much more broadly.
Now, you mentioned the tool. It's an assessment vehicle that's
Yep.
actually available freely on your website, right?
Right. So the assessment tool is available on our website, but you really should get it through your practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because you can do the analysis, but oftentimes an individual, a layperson, isn't going to really understand what it's telling them, right? They really need that financial practitioner who says, okay, is your goal debt management? Is it wealth management? Is it buying a home? Because that's going to be the combination that you need to be able to understand if your habits, remember, habits and behaviors, we need different ones at different points of our lives, right? At some point in retirement, I love to use those people who were told by their depression parents, right? Those boomers, that they couldn't trust the system, they had to save, pensions might not be here, 401k only started 1978, right? So they were obedient, they saved, but where are we now? Time is more valuable than the money, and a lot of them can't spend it. Because the habit that was built was save.
Yeah, I got a little of that myself.
Yeah. But again, if they really understood, right, the time, the odds of them running out of time is more prevalent than
that's
them running out of money.
That's one of those interesting ones. You got a very bifurcated, kind of population where a whole bunch of folks, they have a whole lot more money than time, but then there's a whole bunch, much larger bunch of people who don't have the other. So it's moneyhabitudes.com.
Yep.
And, given that I'm going to assume that the majority of our listeners are affiliated with credit unions and, as actual employees, members and employees, fintechs, when you talk about working with your practitioner, who are you referring to there?
So that is the community educators, the wealth managers. We train them on how to look at the tool.
And that's the train the trainer.
Exactly.
That's where you can come in then to come to the credit union and do that.
Exactly. And a lot of times it's train the trainer and tell us a good idea of how we can run an event with this product that'll draw in that attention.
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
Kara Maksud.
Wonderful.
Money Habitudes. Check out the website, moneyhabitudes.com. We'll be talking more.
Thank you.
So I'm holding a pack of the Money Habitudes cards in my hand right now. Kara was kind enough to give me a couple of versions, the teen version and the, it says Money Habitudes 2. So I guess it's kind of version 2 of the, V2.0, a second edition of their cards. Literally look just like playing cards. You could easily be convinced they were. It also occurred to me that they look a bit like a pack of cigarettes. And I could almost see some, especially when she makes the comparison of the military and things like that to the PX. And do they still sell cigarettes at the PX? Yeah, I may be dating myself. I don't know. But and she mentioned that the cards from a tactile standpoint or just a conversation starter are a great thing that she's found that a lot of credit unions like to kind of keep in the waiting area as people are there. I could also see maybe I might think of them as tarot cards. I'm not sure she'd like that comparison. I also really like the Myers-Briggs analogy, that if you think about going through the personal assessment about your money personality, I think that really kind of resonated with me. So I thought that was cool. The military examples was the one that really fascinated me. I'd never really thought about that before. that you've got, a bunch of people who in many cases went directly from their families' houses into the military, suddenly have a paycheck, have a full-time job, but most of their daily expenses, the food, rent, housing, things like that, are all taken care of for them. And then even more so, if they get deployed, I had not realized that still is the origin of the phrase combat pay, that they actually get additional money if they're overseas, and they have even less chance to spend it. So then all of a sudden it's binging time when you actually have shore leave or whatever else, and you have a break and you can actually cut loose a bit and have some fun. So it's a very challenging environment from which to actually develop good money habits. Also feels to me a bit like an athlete who winds up going directly out of college and hits it big in the draft and gets a big contract and doesn't have any real infrastructure in terms of knowing how to actually deal with that, most likely, if you're talking about 7-figure salaries. And again, probably on the road, having your hotels taken care of and your meals taken care of and things like that. The same panel, by the way, that Kara was on was another participant was Tanya Van Court, who we've spoken to here before, who's the CEO of Goalsetter. I did the athlete comparison or analogy kind of struck me on that one, because 3 of her investors in Goalsetter, it could be the reason why this kind of logic, in terms of money education, which is what Goalsetter does as well, that 3 of her investors are athletes, professional athletes, Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, and Carmelo Anthony. I also really like that concept of the negative net worth mindset and having to get people out of that. So I plan to have more conversations. I think this whole notion, and I didn't even realize that degree existed, that Kara got back and went back and earned after her career on Wall Street. So fascinating stuff overall. So really appreciate her taking the time to talk. Somewhat related to that as well was I was trading notes about this and just kind of spitballing on it. Nothing in terms of hard analysis, but just kind of speculating. The latest information from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Household Economics and Decision Making, SHED for short. There was a great blog on that was actually posted by Callahan and Associates, and it basically just references the data from the Fed research, and we'll post a link to that as well. But it talked about the unbanked rate among the U.S. population split by income level. Not surprisingly, the lowest income people have the highest unbanked rate. Those earning under $25,000 a year are 17% unbanked, according to the survey. That level drops dramatically to 4% already just by the $25,000 to $50,000 a year income level, and even further down after that. But here's the part that really caught my attention, is that under 25K group, 16% of those individuals have paid an overdraft fee in the past year. It didn't get into how many times they paid an overdraft fee. It didn't talk about the cumulative cost that they incurred. But it kind of begged the question to me, because we've gotten into this before, and I think I've mentioned I've sat in on focus groups with some financially strapped consumers talking about, there's that kind of paternalistic conversation that takes place sometime. We don't want to assume that these people are necessarily making the wrong decisions. And are we in a situation where maybe the cost of having a bank account where you're going to get hit for all those fees, winds up adding up to the point that maybe that's why you don't have a bank account? May not be the wisest choice in the long run, but when you're trying to really just kind of keep the wheels on the bus in the here and now, maybe that isn't so bad. I mean, I know we can say, okay, you've got check cashing fees and all those types of things, but let's kind of take a closer look. I'd like to see if we can do the math and see just how, if that always is the case. It's and this ties back to that comment about PayPal, because one of the options, I have to believe that when we say overdraft fees, those are bank overdraft fees. It didn't say anything about other expenses that they may be incurring. You can bet those are high too. I'd like to see those two kind of put next to each other, so you can make a more informed decision about those two, how those stack up to each other. So again, I'd love to hear more conversation around that. Again, financial wellness, it all comes together, and I'm sure we'll be having more conversations about that in the near term. As I said, those things will all be up there on the in the show notes, which you can find on the website, big-fintech.com. If you go to the media tab, you'll find this episode, if you haven't already, and all the past episodes. And you should also be able to access our show notes if you are listening via Spotify, Apple Music, wherever else you get your podcasts. And if you haven't already, we'd always appreciate if you would subscribe to the podcast as well, if you are so inclined. My name is Glenn Sarvati. Once again, my firm is 154 Advisors. You can find me on LinkedIn or on X or Blue Sky at 154 Advisors. You can find the Best Innovation Group at either of those places at Big FinTech or our Grand Poobah, John Best, at JB FinTech. If you happen to be listening to this right as it comes out, we have a great town hall coming up on Wednesday, May 8th, featuring Ann Legg, our friend from Thrive Strategic Advisors. Kind of a follow-up conversation to a town hall that was very well received back in early April around how to get credit unions prepared to leverage the benefits of artificial intelligence. So that's, and again, tying back again to the site, as I mentioned, take a look at the page on AI services from the Best Innovation Group on the website. Again, you need to register for that in advance. If you're listening before the 8th, please just go out to cutownhall.com. It is free to join, but ask for an invitation and you'll get the registration link. If you happen to be listening after that, you should be able to find the replay at cutownhall.com. If you're listening right when this is dropping, I will be down at the Nacha Payments Conference down in Miami, Florida, where the agenda looks, it's one of those, again, that I really... it's one of those good problems to have. There's a couple of times over the course of the 3 days where I'm looking going, wait a second, there are like 3 sessions I really, really want to hear happening at the same time. So I'm going to look into cloning myself and see if I can get more of them. And at the same time, I'm going to track down as many of the interesting people that I find there that I think you'd enjoy hearing from and getting some interviews that hopefully we'll be sharing with you next week here on the Bigcast. So please do check in with us again then. We have new content that typically drops every Tuesday. And until then, and as I always say, because I mean it, thanks so much for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Bigcast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech. Email info@big-fintech.com. Or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.